Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. Today's podcast is just me coming to you from my studio. I don't really tell you all this, and I'm pretty sure you can probably surmise and put it together, but when I record these episodes, I'm actually in my art studio here at home. And while I do have a gallery that I'm executive director of, I did have my own gallery. Really, I'm coming to you from the heart, from the heart of where I create. And so today's episode is taking you into that, talking to you a little bit more about who I am, my history, and truthfully, why I created this podcast. And I'll start with that. The podcast, Emerald City Creatives, um, in, in its inception, when it was created, the intent was to create a space where other artists around Seattle could hear about each other, could connect to each other, and talk to each other via podcast. It was a way to really highlight and focus on an artist for a full hour and really delve into their story, why they create, what mediums they use, all of that, and really get into the nitty gritty of what makes us creatives here in the Emerald City or Seattle. But what happened is Seattle is it's a very special city, and I say that in a positive way. It's a special city because there's just so many cultures and so many. It's an international city. We have so many people from all around the world that it wouldn't really reflect Seattle if I kept it only to people based in Seattle. At the same time, I do want to be intentional with the community. Not to say that I want to be I want to be very focused on the community, and so I had to set parameters. And me being someone who grew up and spent their entire life on the West Coast, I was like, okay, fine. We'll do the Pacific Northwest, Idaho, Oregon, Washington. And I was thinking, again, United States. And but the problem is Seattle is an international city, this whole Pacific Northwest. And so I was like, well, I have to open it up to like Vancouver and British Columbia. I love it up there. And then I was like, well, if I'm going to go all the way up there, I really kind of have to bring it back home. And so I was like, I got to include California. And so really what it's become is the entirety of the West Coast. And I say that also realizing I need to take into account, like Nevada, Arizona. And so right now, this podcast is dedicated to artists of the West Coast, rooted here in the Emerald City where I have made my home. And I say I have made my home because I'm not actually from Seattle. Like I said earlier, I'm from California. I'm from a place called Bakersfield, California. It is in the southern Central Valley of California. It's a city that's really known for its agriculture. It's also kind of a gateway city. You have to pass through it if you're going to go to, if you're coming from Northern California, trying to go to Southern California, or vice versa, if you're trying to get out and get to Vegas or Fresno or in other parts of Nevada, we have so many people come through that city. And it's where I got my start as an artist because it's where I grew up. And really, it played a key role in framing my methodology and how I go about creating community within the arts. Bakersfield, for all of its flaws, it was beautiful in that it was a city where people knew each other, especially like amongst the Black community. A lot of us had been there since the Dust Bowl, and that's what brought us over. My great grandfather, I think it's two greats, he actually, his first language was French, and he helped a lot of Black African Americans find work after the Dust Bowl in the Central Valley. And our family has been there ever since. And so as our family has grown, our sense of community and connectedness to everyone has grown. And what it's really allowed for us to do, or for me to do, is really understand the value of being able to come together on projects, on community needs, and advocacy. And that shaped my framework when I came here to Seattle. That I want to call it a small town. It really is not a small town, but it has a small town vibe. But that small town mentality of we all have to kind of come together for the good of the community, I bring that here to Seattle and the projects that I work on and the people that I talk to, because really, no matter how big or small a city is, it's nothing without its community. It's literally the bedrock of things. Yeah, and what I like to say about this podcast is this is helping to strengthen that bedrock. Um, I have about, at the time of taping this, I think I have about 50 more interviews to conduct for this season, and the goal is like a new episode every week. And will I be able to hit that? I don't know. We're going to get into that a little bit later because I'm one person, but the intent is at the end of the season, that will be about 50 interviews, 50 episodes, 50 artists that you get a chance to really one-on-one get to know. And I'm hoping that looks like a community that gets to tap in and collaborate with artists that they resonate with, or find out opportunities that help them level up their art experience. For example, we had Judy from We Belong Seattle. Judy is the executive director for the art gallery that she is the board member for the gallery that I'm the executive director of, the Fishbowl. And Judy specializes in grants, and specifically grants that help BIPOC creators fund their art projects. And so I have Judy. I'm going to space on some of my guests because I'm trying to think of them on the fly, but we had Moet, who is a historian, who was also an artist that uses collage to bring our stories together. We have so many different talents that we're bringing in. I have a couple that I can't even talk about yet because their stuff isn't out yet. But we really hit every genre when it comes to creatives and when it comes to artists. And this is all in the hopes of creating a closer knit community. And the reason for that, the reason why it's so important, and I'm doing this, as a matter of fact, I am filming this for the second time because I didn't like the first take, and it's 10 o'clock at night. And I'm doing this because I realize that our sacred spaces, where BIPOC, queer creatives, neurodivergent creatives can create, it's never been a place where it's truly been safe. When you look at major artist movements of BIPOC communities, specifically Black communities, it's always been done and created under the watchful eye of those in power. It's been done under the threat of retaliation from white supremacy. One of the things that I keep in the back of my mind that motivates me to create and to document your stuff, is when I was in my theater class back at CSU Bakersfield, my alma mater. I was at a point where I was really frustrated because when I had asked one of my art teachers, why aren't we learning about architecture and like the art and the art history of places in Africa in our survey class, I was simply told that there wasn't any. And I was like, well, we have these ziggurats, you have the mass, but what about the more up-to-date, more recent things? And I keep in mind, this was 2009. Yes, I did my research, but I'll be completely honest, the internet just wasn't what the internet of yesterday was not the internet of today. You young people out there, let me tell you, you don't know how good you have it. And it frustrated me. And then I ended up taking a theater class, and instead what happened is my instructor told me what actually happened. And for example, here in the Americas, here in the US, we had a very vibrant and thriving theater, music hall communities within the Black culture since slavery. And what happened mid-century is that there were a lot of playhouses and creatives that were not only were the playhouses and theaters burned down, but they were burned while their creators and their creatives were lynched and left to hang inside the burning buildings. And it's something that I keep in the back of my mind because I understand that we've lost a lot of history. I see so many writers go to Shakespeare to help them when they're trying to learn how to write their first play or develop a story. But how many Shakespeares did we lose as playhouses were burned down, as um, theaters, as music halls were destroyed? And with all of that, the paintings and the artwork, what did we lose? And the truth is, we'll never know. Shoot, we might be able to use AI now to try and approximate what might have been lost, but even then, it's only it's only going to be a faint wisp of what was lost. And I use that as my motivation today because when you look around and Black history, it was never fully taught to begin with. Growing up, I had to literally go to school, then learn Black history after school. But even now, what little bit was taught in the public schools is now under attack. That only means that we have to work even that much harder to be able to make sure that the things that we create artistically to tell our stories on our own terms. And that's very important. Black history isn't necessarily going to cease being taught. It's just going to be taught from the viewpoint and the lens of the oppressor. And that's very key to keep in mind because, and I'll tell you this from growing up, I had a teacher that had us believing that slaves actually enjoyed what they were doing. And then I went home and I told my mom, and my mom corrected that right quick. And I say that because when we don't tell the stories from our own perspectives, from our own knowledge, on our own terms, then our history will be erased. And so that's why I keep in my back of my mind to keep me so motivated to create and to keep going. But I also take with me the stories of my ancestors, not in the wholeness of Black history, but like in my immediate bloodline. And I take the story of like my great aunt, who she had to literally fight to keep Black students safe when they were integrating schools in our hometown, the very schools that I was educated in, and then that are still standing. I understand that the history that people think is a long time ago are the very things that I saw the direct impact of. So like when it comes to integration, I hope my family doesn't mind me sharing this, but I remember my dad having nightmares even in his own adulthood from what he had to suffer and go through with his peers when he was in school and they were integrating in our hometown. And again, I say this because it also gives me motivation. Hearing my parents' stories, hearing my great aunt's stories, hearing my great grandparents' stories and the stories passed down, it gives me motivation because it allows me to know that I come from a people and from a line that has withstood and has found a way to make a way when there wasn't a way that was really apparent. And this brings me into the subject for today of what success looks like. When it comes to success, it's not going to look like success. Sorry about it, but it's just not until you've already arrived. And even then, once you've arrived, it won't look like success until you've been there for a while. And that's really important because oftentimes we look at influencers, we look at celebrities, we look at what we deem overnight successes, and we say, oh, that is what success is. And I want to make sure that I take time and space with this podcast to dispel that notion that success is overnight, because all of the artists that I've brought on, don't get me wrong, they are very successful. But if you notice, they're still working towards something. They still haven't arrived um, at the space in which they said they've arrived or they want to arrive. They're still on their journey. And so that's like one of the final reasons that I created this podcast, is I wanted to dispel what success looked like, because there's a lot of struggle behind the scenes. I went from being an artist that was trying to get into galleries to owning and running their own gallery, and then having to realize what that looked like, what it looked like to maintain relationships, and really the admin side of the thing that I've always considered just a passion hobby. So yeah, when we come back, I'm going to dive a little bit more into that. And then I'm going to take you into a couple of questions and really dive into what success looks like. Thank you for being here for the first quarter of this. I'm going to go into the details and really talk about success now. So first things first, when it comes to success and pursuing success, understand that success is not linear at all. I can't point out a single person who's actually had linear success. They've had setbacks. I just got through listening to Miss Tina's audiobook, for Beyonce's mom's audiobook. And even in that, she describes that even Beyonce still had to take vocal classes, because even with all that raw talent, she still had to learn how to like own it, train it, own it. And that doesn't come from linear success. Like, you are going to have some things that are going to go wrong. You're going to have some things that are going to make you have to like turn around, hit the fundamentals, and redo things. For me, this is what that looked like. When I came to Seattle, 2019, right before the pandemic, I hadn't really created art in almost a decade. Not that I had given up, it's just the practice had disappeared. I had doubted myself and told myself that what I thought was art was just a fluke. And I think part of it was because I needed to go through a period in which I really built up my it's kind of like a dam, if I had to describe the feeling. I had to kind of build up those creative juices. I had to let the dam fill with all this pent up artistic energy, all this desire to create, this desire to say something, looking around and seeing a world which didn't match the trajectory that I really had hoped it would go on, and realizing I had to be able to like speak out in some way, shape, or form. And so I'm going to kind of break a rule and adjust my camera. If you look up, that's one of the more recent pieces that I've worked on, but it's very different from what I did before that 10-year gap. And the reason for that is I had shit to say, and I just didn't know how to say it yet. And part of that is because when it comes to success, you cannot begin that journey of success until you face yourself and you really lean into and talk about those things that you don't or aren't ready to talk about. So this piece behind me, it is dedicated to resisting and standing up against the anti-trans, anti-drag bills that were passed in different states around the United States. Now, for me, it's very hard to, I'd say myself, pre-2019, still living in Bakersfield. And this is not to knock Bakersfield. I love Bakersfield, but I wasn't safe enough to be myself fully, because I was still in survival mode. I wasn't necessarily in a space where I could be openly gay, because I still saw people gay bashing. I couldn't be non-binary because they were still struggling with gay. They weren't ready for that next conversation. Truth be told, I wasn't ready for that conversation either, because even though I always knew that I don't necessarily feel like I fit in my body, I didn't have a chance to really question what that was. because I was focused on survival. You don't really have a chance to truly fully develop your sense of self um, while you're focused on survival. And a lot of my artwork, it's very queer now. This art here, Body, that I'm going to revisit. I did it kind of quick, but like this is all about body dysmorphia and then owning, you know, being. I mean, me. I'm a pretty big guy, so it's like owning your physique and who you are. Um, it's an androgynous piece because it's not necessarily a man or a woman's body. I couldn't create pieces. And these are just like the pieces that I literally have right next to me. I have other pieces that are like in shows right now and on display. Um, but the pieces that are on in shows and are on display, I wouldn't have gotten there had I not experimented and really been able to hone my voice. And that came with failure. Um, and I say that and I pause there because when it comes to success, it's really important to realize that success comes on the heels of failure. And around the time I got back into doing art, it was 2019, COVID happened. 2020, my cousin Travis Johnson reached out to me. He was doing this. Y'all, this is like the perfect story of failure. So he was doing this group show in out of the South Puget Sound Gallery, and he needed a mentor because it was a show where they had senior veteran artists and emerging artists paired together, and they had mentees. Except, he is my cousin. This goes back to that community aspect of family. But just because he's my cousin doesn't mean he was going to give me the role. He actually had other people lined up for it, but he had me audition for it. So it's very Wayne's family where they had to still audition to like get help from their older brother. I think I painted like 23 pieces to submit for that show, and every single one was no, nope. I mean, you have a concept, but you might want to move away from that, and it wasn't in a bad way because the way he mentors is he gives you freedom. But I was still in that survivalist mindset. I hadn't really let myself die to try new things and really become experimental. And then I did. Then it was like the last two paintings almost before the deadline, and I just had to like let go. I don't know what happened. It was just like this mode switch where I had created so many, like 23 failure paintings, that my body was just like, look, you failed so many times. You just have to get into this creative flow and just let us do what we're going to do. Um, and I just kind of went off instinct. And sounds really ambiguous. Don't worry. I'm going to bring this into something concrete and actionable. But in that ambiguity, I got two pieces that were really solid. And he said, there you go. Yes. And he let me put them in the show. I will say now, years later, one of the pieces I love. I have built off of that. And a lot of the pieces that I have in shows now are because of that original painting. And that one was called In Search Of. It was more of a fall autumn theme. It looked at the changing of life. It was purely abstract. And then In Search Of would later become Bloom, and Bloom is the one that would get the award. And then Bloom is what would open up the doors for so many other art opportunities. But it wasn't until I had failed enough that my body and my mind was able to just kind of take over and start doing things. And really what had happened is I had tried so many times. I had to restart and start again so many times that my mind and my body was just like, okay, we know this didn't work. We know this didn't work. This did not work either. This is something that we've been kind of cooking in the back of our mind. let's just go ahead and bring this to the forefront, hit play, and see what happens. And I say that to say, when you are failing, trying and failing multiple times, what's actually happening, should be happening, is you should be taking into account what did work, what didn't work. And from there, kind of putting together and synthesizing what the next step should be. And for me, I was working on these pieces that were looking at scales. And I was really looking at justice and what that had meant. The reason why is this was about 2021, once the show was actually happening. It was right after George Floyd, and this idea of justice and what we really weigh as important in our lives was at the forefront of my mind, and I couldn't. Well, I definitely didn't let it go. I'm actually working on a piece now with that motif. That's a story for another day, but I couldn't let it go, and my mind and my body was just like, we do have something to say about this, and we will, but we need some time to cook. We need some time to marinate and develop. But in the meantime, as I was doing that, I was also thinking of other things like this state of transition and how things are changing. And that's what stepped up in terms of like what I created. This kind of goes back to success, and that as you try things, whether you're a poet, whether you're a creative, whether you're a business person, as you try and fail again, you're going to see patterns and things out in the community, and you're going to see things that work. You're going to have conversations. You can't create out of nothing, and really, what those failures brings is it brings raw substance and like raw materials to create. Those pieces later, the ones I was working on with the scales and the justice. Oh gosh, sorry, I thought I had it with me, but I have one smaller piece, and then I have like a giant, much like wall-sized piece that I'm working on. And it wouldn't be until 2025 that I would come back to that motif. And when I started painting it, when I started getting into it, let me tell you, I sent it to my cousin. I was like, hey, I know years ago we talked about this and how like the paintings I was doing just were not landing. What do you think? And then I got the thumbs up. Those 23 paintings, and what, 4 years later, and that's what success looks like. Is it's not going to be linear. Sometimes the thing that you're on fire about, you might need to hang it on the shelf for a little bit and let your skills catch up to where they need to be. And that's really what needed to happen for me, for the paintings that I was thinking about, for what I was trying to create. My ability to conceive an idea, to really change up my art style to communicate that idea and then put it together as something cohesive. When I was trying to work on those, it wasn't there yet. It wouldn't be until a couple of years of me really getting back into art, because again, I hadn't painted in about 10 years. That's the problem. I wasn't where I needed to be to have these conversations yet through my art. And that brings me to the next thing of success and what it looks like. Success is showing up. You can't disappear for a period of time and then kind of come back to things as if nothing ever happened. If you're not creating or using your muscle, or using what you're supposed to be doing in the right way, it's going to atrophy, it's going to diminish. And so I had let my art skills diminish for about a decade. And meanwhile, in my head, I was having these more mature conversations than I did when I was a junior artist. And now, when I'm ready to say something, I can't, because I now have to play catch up. And so I say that to say, stay on top of your art. Success really looks like showing up, and showing up every day, not just for yourself, but for your community. And that brings me to the next thing. I'm going to skip ahead to like what's happening now and what showing up looks like. So 2024, I moved back to Seattle. And what happened is I there was a I don't know how to explain it, but I left a toxic environment, and my fiance on our drive back told me, he's like, "Hey, you're a hard worker and you're good at what you do, but because you're so kind, people are going to take advantage of that, and it's not going to be um, no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try and fit in, you're just not going to fit in into that environment." And this was like a healthcare environment. One of the slogans that one of my peers always said was, "Nurses eat their own," and that they were very rude and very harsh to the nurses. And I'm not that person. I never will be. And I just can't be. I can't. I don't have it in my body. And so his challenge to me was, when we come back to Seattle, you know, create that space in which you're going to thrive. And so what that looks like is I had before I left to Vegas, I had a queer art exhibition, and so that was an IP that I kept with myself. And that's when I would tell. Well, also want to remind you of is, as you come up with ideas and create them, make sure that you keep connected to your IP or your intellectual property. Make sure you protect it. Get a website, get a domain, get it all branded out. But I had that IP, the queer art exhibition. And what I did is I built from there. I looked at what's something small that I could do. And that small thing was, I can create a business plan. I'm getting my doctorate in business administration. I have extensive experience within corporate business planning. And so I created a business plan. I would love to show it to you all, by the way, but it is a very big poster that I keep on my wall. But it started off with something small, something that I could manage, which was paint and sips. I learned how to model and make a paint and sip business, and I built from there. There were some failures, like y'all. Okay, so I start working for this paint and sip company, and I signed up to start working for them, and it wasn't like 2 months until they finally booked me for a gig. Well, I didn't have 2 months to waste, so I reached out to a friend of mine who let me use their pub for an event. And so I created a painting. We did the painting, and it was fun. But I also had to learn how to market. I had to learn how to promote, sell tickets, all that, and build out. So I started small, and I grew from there. And that's what also the success looks like: is you want to start small with something you can do, which is, um, you know, in my case, it was paint parties. With you, it might be something unique, but start small. And then from there, look at, a couple other goals you have and where you want to expand. So for those of you who are watching, I'm actually looking away at the display. But I start with paint sips, and I want to grow my social media, because social media would allow me to get more sales of my art. And so I started with that. And in 2024, I knew I wanted to have a podcast. I wanted to be able to showcase artists, and I wanted to be able to advertise services and projects that I offer. For example, I have the third annual art exhibition. It's in its third year. I want to let you all know to apply, but I also want to make sure that I'm helping artists get discovered. I'm using my experience with marketing and sales to help them sell their art. And then I also do want to sell my own artwork. And so I've partnered with another company that has me go out and do paid art talks and shows my work and sells my art for me. And then from there, I also have a couple of other things where I'll do commissions from time to time, although I'm very protective of my time, so I don't take, it's usually a special case where I'll take a commission. And then I also have a certificate as an art therapy practitioner. And so that's helped me with grief groups and people who really need someone to help them process stress and things that's going on through art. And then finally, and this is the one that really took off that I had no idea was going to take off the way that it did, but curating shows. I think I've curated about 10 shows now. And that was something that I thought I might have. I'm looking at my goal. I think I had a goal of four shows, and I'm at 10. And what that really looked like is I created a pipeline that kind of led from one thing to the next thing and how it all fed into each other. And what was really cool is my mom came to visit me and my fiance about a year ago to see the gallery, and that poster happened to be up in our guest room. And she saw it. She's like, "Yeah, I like this. Like, you have a whole plan. Like, this is a good plan." And it's nice because it's my mom's affirmation. Okay, so I don't want to take too much of all of your time. We're at the 36-minute mark, and I still have some things I want to talk to you all in terms of success. So here's a couple of things that help me with success and help me get going. And the first one is I make this thing where I have to have, based on my age, I have to have that many fails before I turn that age. So for example, this year I turned 35. My goal is to fail at 35 things before 35. And I came up with this idea from the book Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. And Shonda got to this place where she was able to, she had said no to a lot of things, but she really needed to start saying yes. It would change the things in her life. And so my 30 fails looks like me saying yes, taking on things that scare me. It's not necessarily all career-based either. For example, I'm never doing this, but bungee jumping could be one of those things. I saw Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I'm never bungee jumping. That's just not happening. But it's things like that. It's things that scare me, push me out of my comfort zone. And the goal is to do or attempt 35. Well, sorry. The goal is to try as many things until I get to 35 failures, if that makes sense. So if I try 35 things and I fail 35 times, I'm done. But if I try 80 things and I only get to 20 failures, I still have a lot to do. Now, this is a challenge that I truly have never completed. And the reason why is because as I go and try things that scare me, that push me, I actually have a lot more successes than I do failures. And even the things that fail, or the things that I feel fail, turn into success. And so an example of this is I had a physical art gallery in Pioneer Square. I ended up letting it go in December after I received a grant because I realized I could use the grant money to do so much more in the community if it wasn't going towards paying rent at a store. Instead, I could host pop-ups. I could pay and finance those, which, by the way, I am also fundraising to hold events like that. So there will be a link in the comments. Please donate to help with our public artist talks and shows and helping to curate and keep things free and affordable for artists. But I created these opportunities for myself because I was pursuing failure. And then what started to happen is I started working with people that I started seeing around town, people that I was close to. And as these opportunities presented themselves, I quickly began to realize that not everyone who says yes, they want to help out or get involved necessarily mean it. They might mean it to be nice, but it might not necessarily be for them. And so something that my fiance introduced into my methodology was this idea of if it's not a hell yes, then it's a hell no. And it's okay. And I say that because there was an opportunity I had to kind of write and create my own job. Everything, I did the research for it. But what happened is the team kind of dragged their feet on it. And it's okay. There's a lot going on. But a month passed, and I was like, okay, well, we need to think about this. This is the law. This is the stuff that we can do. This is how I can like write the grant for it. This is how I can do all the funding. And my fiance's like, you're doing all this work. You're not getting paid for it. And they still haven't pulled the trigger. He's like, if it's not a hell yeah, it's a hell no. And I started applying that to artists that I would collaborate with, you know, and it goes back to what I said earlier about showing up. Success really is all about showing up for yourself, for your community. And so if people aren't saying hell yeah with you, it means that you're going to end up doing the work by yourself. And hell no, I'm not going to do the work by myself. I'm sorry, I can't. I am one person. So I say that for you all to keep in mind that you have to say hell no sometimes. And if the other people aren't saying hell yeah with you, you got to say hell no. It can't be you. I really hope that I've covered everything when it comes to success, at least what it's looked like for me. When I closed down that gallery, I really thought it was going to be failure. But what happened is the week that I closed down the gallery and announced, one of our board of directors reached out to me. That was Yam, and I'm so thankful for you, Yam. And then Judy Lee reached out to me. I'm so thankful for you as well. Both of them are the board of directors for the Fishbowl. And what I didn't know is that their founder at the time, Raya, which I'm also very proud. Well, actually, hold on. Let me rephrase that. I'm very proud of Raya. I'm very thankful for Raya, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity that they gave me. But they were stepping down from the Fishbowl, and it's not my business to tell, but they have some really cool opportunities coming up for them, and I am so excited for them and what the future holds, and can't wait to see it. But they needed someone they could trust to step in, and that was me. And it wasn't. I visited the Fishbowl a couple of times, but they saw how I showed up at my gallery. And the other thing you have to keep in mind is when it comes to success, you might not feel success. You might feel like you're failing. Let me tell you, when I was in my gallery, I felt like I was failing. There were so many nights where people weren't coming in those doors. There were so many nights where I had an event and I really thought I was going to pack the room, and then the room didn't pack. Or there was one event I did a fundraiser. It was a Rocky Horror Picture Show. I sold out. We sold every ticket, and it was supposed to generate enough cash flow to really help us keep going even long term. And let me tell you all, that didn't happen. And the reason why is there's so many fees. I didn't realize how many fees were involved in getting licensing and then food and then product and all the other stuff to make it happen. And so success and showing up isn't necessarily going to feel like success at the time. And then I ended up coming here to the Fishbowl, where we have a team of volunteers. At the gallery, it was kind of just myself, my fiance when he was able to help out, and then other volunteers when they would come in and could help. But I didn't have like a mobilized team all the time. And then I came to the Fishbowl, where they have a team all the time, which is amazing. So I say that to say, when it comes to things where it looks like it's the end or it looks like failure, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to lean into it, because oftentimes that's where you're going to find the success. And then finally, a warning. Yes, now a warning. When it comes to success, or even trying to do what I did, where it's not necessarily a straight line, but you're trying a whole bunch of things. Like right now, I'm running 2 galleries, two nonprofit, which are both nonprofit. Well, sorry, they're both fiscally sponsored and are trying to operate as much like a nonprofit as they can. It's exhausting. And then on top of that, I'm doing a podcast on top of my full-time job, on top of trying to get my doctorate, which, with the way things are going politically, it feels like a nightmare. It's a lot. And I'm going to say this to my Black audience out there. Black excellence will not save you. And I say that as much to you all as myself. I thought I had to be perfect in every single thing I did. I thought everything had to be crisp and to a T. I thought I had to have a suit for everything. And I thought I had to be the epitome of Black excellence. I had to look like I was on the cover of a Jet magazine. Um, if you all don't know what a Jet magazine is, look it up. Um, my target audience that I'm talking to is probably going to be in that age demographic where they'll know. And I had to realize that it's not going to save me, because in all of my attempts to attain that level of Black excellence, I still had to deal with racism, even at the gallery, even in the heart of downtown Seattle. There were times where people would call me uh, racist slurs, they would use homophobic slurs, and no matter how excellent I was, that was not going to save me. Um, it's not necessarily going to influence. It's going to influence how people see you and show up, but people who are still going to trip off of you are still going to trip off of you. So not only was it not enough, but it led to burnout. Trying to be excellent all the time, trying to be like perfect and on 10 all the time. It was exhausting, and I had to understand that success comes in the midst of mess. And so right now, this podcast, it's not a mess, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to talk down on it, but I want to have that big background, and I want to make it really look cool, like I have a whole podcast studio. And so this isn't the level of excellence that I want, but I know if I don't start, I'll never get there. And so that's my message to you: is don't wait for things to get perfect to start, because by the time they get perfect, it's too late. And also, if you wait till things are perfect, it's going to be the person who got started before it was perfect. It won't be you. You can't. There's no way to start things from perfect. Um, I'm a Taurus, so for those of you who are Tauruses, a spa day will not fix burnout. You can't fix burnout at a simple spa day. You can't microdose rest. You do have to take some time to stop, and you cannot create if you don't have something going in and feeding you and kind of nourishing your soul. And so taking time for self-care and rest, it's very important. I am the king of burnout, and I don't say that proudly. I say that as a warning. I'm saying it as someone who has had to take the health hits, who has not been able to show up for people the way that they want to, who has had to let some things go. Pace yourself. Take some time for the people around you, because you only get one time. I guess you only get one time around the sun. You only get one life, and all of this isn't worth it if you're not getting to spend quality time with the people that matter. But then also, what really helped me is just embracing my truth. I am someone who loves rules, who loves structure, and so I build all my stuff around structure. And it's why people like me. If they want someone who's a little bit more spontaneous, a little bit more out there, they know it's not going to be me. They know I'll cheer that person on, and I will come along for the ride, but I don't get to generate the spontaneity, because that's just not who I am. I walk in my truth, and I seek to find where I can serve people with my skill set and meet them where I'm at. And I say that because that's another warning when it comes to success. Don't try and be what you're not. This world is a tapestry and a puzzle piece, and it's only beautiful if you're serving the people with who you are. Don't be afraid of change and growth, but don't try and be something that you're not. Be willing to lose also. You know, I filled out all these grants last year, and I had to be willing to lose out on the grants and not get the grants in order to be able to get them. You have to be willing to risk that no in order to really uh, attain that success on the other side. And this is what's really important also. This last warning I'm really going to go into, and then I'm going to bring it home for us all. When it comes to protecting your creativity, there are people who are going to see that and want to extinguish that light. In the corporate world, there's always going to be someone who's going to want to keep the status quo. There are people that are going to be bullies. It's just going to happen because we're humans, we're messy. One thing that I learned that I could do and I hope you all can do it too. And this comes from being a millennial and having to survive '08 and find work, is I've learned that I can get down in the mud of life, not in a confrontational way, but when I left healthcare, I ended up working. I started this business that I do now when I was unemployed. I was I then started working a pizza job as a delivery driver. I didn't tell anyone this. I was a delivery driver, and I also taught kids at a school. And really, during that time, that is what set the stage for me to get where I am now. Being a delivery driver, it allowed me to meet some of the drag queens that I would win this. They won their grant. I also won my grant, and we were in the same room together later on. And I'm cheering on what they do. Shout out to the Career Sick Pay Fund, but that's where I ran into. Um, but it was a time where I had to do what I had to do to get through, and that downtime allowed me to create the platform. I think in that time, I also got my certification to be an art therapy practitioner. I started taking on commissions. I started planning the next curating show. Um, and I say that to say, protect who you are. If you've got to take a job that might not align with where you saw yourself with your career, because you have to protect your mental, you have to protect your health, do that. The place where I was working was so bad that stress-wise, the doctor was like, if you don't step away, it's either you or your life. Like it's unhealthy. Um, and so we stepped away. And well, that's not the full story, by the way, but we stepped away, and my health has improved. Um, I could use a little bit more rest, but it's improved drastically. And so I say that to say, as long as you have breath in your lungs, you can always rebuild. It's never too late to rebuild. And oftentimes during that rebuilding, you're able to make things a little bit stronger. You're able to really evaluate what matters, and you're able to really tap into your community in a new way. And I'm so thankful to my fiance, because without him, I would not have been able to rebuild or have that person to cheer me on. Um, I end every podcast with the question, what song really captures your creative process? And so I realize I've kind of gone on, and so I'm going to wrap it up with there's this song by Common that features Maya Angelou, and it's called The Dreamer. And this is a poem that ever since I heard it, I feel like it's probably been 10 years now. It's a poem that I go back to whenever I feel down. And it is this: once you find that your soldiers are dropping and your speech gets slow and hazy, you better change your way of being before you find that your brain got lazy. And that kind of goes back to, you can't stay in places that are not healthy. You have to be willing to rebuild. And then Maya Angelou goes on to say, you can build a better future when you join the winning team. If your desire is a bright tomorrow, you must build a brighter dream. And again, that goes to the rebuilding, to the phoenix that I kind of opened this up with. You have to be willing to think of and see the future that you're looking forward to, you're trying to create, and chunk it down into the building blocks to arrange and to reach that. And then as you go into that poem a little bit deeper, she goes on to say, dare let your dreams reach beyond you, and know that history holds more than it seems. We are alive today because our ancestors desired to dream, dared to dream. And then it goes into all of the diaspora, not just the African Americans, but Jews, people from South America, Mexico, Asia, and all that they have had to endure. And she goes into that and says, and points to how all of those cultures had to dream a brighter dream for their descendants today. And I say that because it is on all of us as a culture, but it's all on all of us as artists to really be that dream. Toni Morrison says that it's when life gets hard, that is when artists go to work. and I tell my other artists that when they look at the politics, they look at what's going on, and they get discouraged, is that you have to be willing to roll up your sleeves, dig in, and get to work, because really your paintings, your music, your choreography, your drag, um, you showing up as who you are to tell your story on your own terms, apart from those that would try to whitewash and dominate the narrative. When you show up, it's an act of defiance, in a very real way that connects with people on an emotional level, that defeats the the imposed false logics, um, and the reasonings and the way that we try and justify the evil in our world. When you show up as an artist and share your truth and share the truth, um, it's the building blocks to dream a better tomorrow for so many other people. And that's what community success looks like. And so I know this has all been about the individual success, but really, I don't do any of this for myself, because if I did, I'd probably get paid a little bit more. Um, Golly, I'd get paid so much more if I just focused on myself. But no. And so I'm focusing on the community, and it really is to serve the community, because I've been in a place and I've seen what it's like when you have to hide who you are to be safe from the community surrounding you. And I have no intent on going back to that or letting those around me go back to that. And so I focus on success, and I focus on the community's success, because I understand what's at stake. I understand my history, and I've seen in the history books what has happened to those communities that have had their history forcibly taken away at the cost of their life. And I understand that as an artist, if I'm going to call myself an artist, if I'm going to come out of hiding after 10 years and truly walk in my truth, um, then I have to go to work, take the risk, and dream that bigger dream. Anyways, thank you all so much for letting me talk at you for this hour. Um, I am excited for all the artists that we have coming up. Please donate to keep this podcast going. It is free, but the donation link also helps me with having events downtown in Pioneer Square that focuses on queer BIPOC history of the arts within Seattle. And it really helps add more to the community. So thank you all. Please keep listening. And yeah, I will see you all in 50 episodes. Have a good one.